The final week in the meta of 2023 was only hosted through 2 tournaments and 1 small local tournament that I can report on this week. So it's only 4 decks across 3 events. Let's get into them. So it was a shock to very little. Ruby Amethyst held 50% of the top 8 spots from this past weekend, hosting a wonderful 8 in top 8s. Amber Ruby was a shocking surprise as it claimed 5 spots in this week's top 8s. Emerald Steel finishing with 3, and Amber Steel finishing with only 1. Honestly, with such a small week, it's interesting to see that these were the 4 decks across 2 50-plus player events that were successful. We're going to look at both of the big 50-player events and the breakdowns thanks to players in the community and fellow content creators releasing the information. But in all honesty, it's pretty shocking to see that this is the way this fell out. Amethyst Steel, nowhere to be found. Sapphire Steel, nowhere to be found. Just, all in all, even having an Amber Steel Flute deck having only 1 copy in top 8s is quite interesting to really look over and see once we get more and more of the data about these events. CM Games in Knoxville, Tennessee was reported on by Kendall Burdett. He finished in the top 4 with his deck in the top left corner. As you can see, the event held 4 control Ruby Amethyst, 1 Arthur Ruby Amethyst, 2 discard decks for Emerald Steel, and 1 Mufasa. The top 4 ended up being 2 control Ruby Amethyst, 1 Ruby Amethyst Arthur, and 1 Emerald Steel discard deck. Now, the Arthur deck is also on the bottom left here, and you can see it's 2 quite different versions of these decks. The top left corner is more of the common look I think we're going to see moving forward for Ruby Amethyst. Do I still think there are ways to build the deck differently? Absolutely. But, that version of the list that he has there with 8 1-drops, playing with the snakes, playing with the crabs, still leaning into Teeth and Ambitions, moving on to Ursula's as the big winner. I think that this is a very common look to this deck that you're going to see moving forward. And while I do believe there are still flex spots and still choices to be made overall, this is definitely a version of the deck that has a good chance of being successful. Down below is the Arthur list. I do enjoy the Arthur version quite a bit. I really like Arthur. However, I think in recent weeks, with more and more steel decks coming to the top of the tables and more smashes coming to the top of the tables, my love for Arthur is starting to fall off because enough players are starting to respect him a little bit more. And because of that, I think this deck has a little bit more worry in a metagame when steel is prevalent. In this particular top 8, it was prevalent, and within the 2 discard decks, I do wonder if those discard decks were packing Smash or not. But all in all, both of these decks quite successful on the day, top 4 in a 52-player event. Can't really go wrong with playing any version of Ruby Amethyst, so I'm just not shocked that these were the more successful decks on the day. Now, speaking about the Ruby Amber decks, Mufasa is a card that has been up and up in recent weeks, and in this past weekend, we saw it hit 4 top 8s, but it also had a conditional win locally for us. There was a tournament I was supposed to attend on December 30th. I was unable to. As you can hear my voice, I'm a little sick, still trying to recover from it. But this player was able to go 4-0 and win a D100 set. I thought it was a very interesting take on the Mufasa style. I don't see too many of the Amber Mickey Mouses in these decks. I definitely don't see too many BLTs in this deck. I feel like this deck is definitely high rolling for the best, which I think is an interesting way to play Mufasa. Also, the ability for Hades. Hades is another card I don't see too commonly. I think you see Snow White more commonly because maybe that's just another way that you're trying to high roll with Mufasa. But having the ability to have a cheaper version of Hades gives you a never-ending loop against the Ruby Amethyst decks, along with just constantly being able to replace Mufasas later in the game, which is great. Or your choice of Surfer, Maleficents, Mickey Mouses, Minnie Mouses, Surfers when they're utilized and useful. All of these things are pretty awesome, but definitely shout out to the player here for finding a way into a 4-0 victory and picking up a D100 set. Not bad. Shout out to Encounter by the way. Lots of good stuff coming from them, coming out of Allentown. If you're in the Philadelphia area, you're looking for tournaments, most Saturdays, the Encounter is hosting events. We're sharing them normally in the Facebook group and in our Discord. So definitely check out those spots if you're looking to play in some Saturday constructed tournaments. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content today, make sure you hit that like button for me. But really, what I want you to do is I want you to take the time and comment a deck that you would like to see me play in league play this week. I'm really wanting to get better community feedback, and I'm looking to play decks from the community. So I made a community post about it yesterday, and I'm going to be choosing a random deck that is commented on this video today, or from the community poll yesterday, or in our Discord, that I'm going to play in this week's league. So I can then take that deck, write a report on it, do a video on it, give a shout out to the viewer that posted it, all those things. I really want to get some community feedback. So enjoy the rest of the video. Tier 1 Games was reported on by Christopher Kevin Carrasco. For those of you that do not know, that is the Lorcanagoons. So shout out to Lorcanagoons. He was able to make top 8 with the Ruby Amethyst deck listed below. But as you saw, the top 8 consisted of 3 Ruby Amethyst, 3 Mufasa, 1 Emerald Steel Discard, and 1 Amber Steel Gaston's Flute. So this was another 52-player event for a 1K, which is great. I believe this took place in California, if I remember correctly. Pretty sure that's where Lorcanagoons is stationed out of. So this is a great showing for a West Coast event. West Coast tournaments have not really been reported on all that often, so it's nice to see a 1K out there become successful, have 52 players, and have a nice top 8, in all honesty, with Mufasa finding a way into 3 top 8s of those lists. As you can see, his version of Ruby Amethyst is more of a hybrid, finding ways and different 2-cost characters to play in his list. He has a 1 of Boone, a 1 of Donald Duck, and 2 LeFous. Then he follows that up with the 3 Teeth with Ambitions. He still has the Crabs. He has Surfers. And of course, like the rest of the normal package here. So really the 2s are the only big difference that I would be looking at when going over this list. But all in all, congrats to Lorcanagoons on a top 8 in the 52-player 1K. If you haven't, definitely check out his channel. Unfortunately, the list for the two events have yet to be released, probably because of the holiday weekend, but we record these on Tuesday mornings or Monday nights, most cases. So instead of looking for the particular list, we're going to talk about the 2 versions of the deck that I have been testing. Amber Steel Flute is a deck that's been evolving ever since PAX Unplugged. I've had many conversations with Dave, the winner of PAX Unplugged, since then about Flute decks. And in all honesty, just exploring different ways to utilize Flute to the best of its ability. You can see here on screen, and I'll put a link to this in the description for anyone that wants to copy from there. This is the list that I've been testing and been working out with. A lot of the key factors here are moving away from the shift targets, moving into Gaston, and I really enjoy trying to find Flute early and sift my hand as much as possible, which is why you see Zimba Future Kings and Cinderella's Night in Trainings, because I'm trying to just constantly flip through my hand and best get rid of uninkables for inkables so I can ink as often as possible before the inevitable first wheel. And adding Gaston and having Ariel adds 2 different ways to get a turn 3 or a turn 4 wheel when necessary. And when you're trying to do those things, having cards on 1 and 2 that allow you to accelerate your hand and sift through your hand and make sure you're curving well and defining your flute when necessary and finding the ink that you need to get to the steps you need earlier in the game to take advantage of a whole new world is the reasons why for this list in general. Again, I'll have the link in the description below if you want to try out the deck. The other deck that was successful this weekend was Emerald Steel Discard. I think this is a really fun deck. A couple weeks ago, I played against this deck in League. This is a modified version from what I saw that he was playing. But what I really like about this particular list is finding leverage for ways to go on the offense. This particular list only has the 2 of for the Prince, but I've seen lists that now have 3 Prince and maybe even 3 Hercules as a way to protect your Buckies and your Prince Johns and your Donald Ducks and things like that as they go in for lore. So while having to sit back and play defense kind of the entire game until you're most comfortable to start luring, you actually have the ability to pressure a little early on and really stretch the game a little bit further in certain situations and in certain matchups when you want to do those things. Also, having a 1-3 bodyguard with resist 1 and the occasional lure 2 doesn't hurt you very much. Actually enables you to pick off certain things and really stay relevant. Of course, unfortunately, still goes down to the fox, but it does leave you open to finding an easier way to remove the fox with Strength of a Raging Fire or a follow-up Grab Your Swords. The deck has found its way into multiple top 8s over the last month, and it's been kind of solidifying itself as a contender within the metagame, and very likely the best version of discard that we have in Rise of the Floodborn. Short and sweet meta report this week. Sorry about my voice in this one. Still trying to get over the cold. I'm actually drinking hot tea while recording this. Very interesting week in the metagame, if you ask me. There was only 4 different decks that succeeded across 2 reported events and then 1 local for me. I do find it interesting that Mufasa is a deck that is on the rise and people are drawn to. I find it interesting that, discard is finding its way to constantly be successful. The deck is very weak to opposing steel decks, but I guess if you're able to just get rid of your opponent's hand in a quick enough fashion, then you're able to turn the tables into your side of putting your opponent on having to top deck a Whole New World or a Grab Your Swords to kind of remove your board. And when they're incapable of doing that, you can really pressure your opponent early and just get away with a lot of damage, which is a lot of fun. And I've really enjoyed the play style of Emerald Steel for discard decks. But all in all, I think that the meta has grown a little bit in recent weeks. You've seen some new cards come to the forefront. We've seen a card like Gaston come in, start singing, which is great. We've seen more versions of Emerald Steel be successful. Cards like even Mouse Armor come into play. Cards like Weight Set come into play, which I think is very interesting. Amber and Amethyst really just kind of not showing up as much as many more, which a lot of people were worried about that deck, really trying to run rampant on the Ruby Amethyst metagame. But with as many steel decks out there, it's shown that it hasn't really been hasn't had the potential of doing that with more and more steel decks coming to the forefront. Sapphire Steel just kind of going invisible all of a sudden, really hyped for a couple weeks there, and then just hasn't found its way home anywhere else. So truly developing the metagame as the weeks go in. But as per always, Ruby Amethyst has been king and has ruled the world. So what can you do there? All in all, thank you guys so much for watching this week. If you're looking forward to more like this, then you should check out this video from last week that covers more decks from the minigame. All in all, again, Happy New Year's to all of us. Very exciting times in the community. Also, comment below with the deck list that you'd like to see me play at my league nights. I'm looking for a new way to interact with the community so much. So if you have that chance, hit me up in the comments with a deck that you'd love to see reported on here on the channel as a special deck tech. Shout out and everything to you for sharing with the deck list.